In one of the most haunting scenes in recent memory, a student named Agnes visits her professor to receive feedback on her thesis. Rather than following her inside, the film lingers on the exterior of the house, gradually shifting from day to night. Only a few lights remain on downstairs, while the upper floors are left in complete darkness. With the assault already foreshadowed, there's no room for doubt. We know something terrible has happened, and now we're left wondering what comes next. Sorry Baby is an exceptional debut, not just about surviving, but overcoming and moving forward. Through Agnes, the film distills how sexual violence doesn't just alter you, but reshapes the very way you move through the world. Through Eva Victor's very nuanced performance, the film slowly and methodically unpacks how trauma transforms a person from within. The film is divided into several parts out of chronological order. This structure allows the audience to absorb and reflect on the dramatic shifts as they unfold. The movie opens with a dimly lit, secluded house glowing in the darkness. We're introduced to Agnes and her best friend Lydia, who frequently reunite every so often to catch up on each other's lives. The opening scene offers a revealing glimpse into who Agnes is, bathed in light yet shadowed in the darkness of her trauma. Agnes lives in an old house nestled in the woods and surrounded by a town that could be straight out of something like Sleepy Hollow. Very quiet, eerie, suspended in time. What begins as a film about friendship slowly unravels into something much darker. The film foreshadows Agnes's assault through her interactions with colleagues and her best friend. Even though we can't be entirely sure where Agnes's anxiety stems from, we can make an educated guess quite early in the film. Up until the end of the film, it's not really clear how much time has gone by between when we first see Agnes and when the assault took place. This uncertainty allows viewers to step into Agnes's perspective. Even prior to this haunting scene, Agnes has found a way to move forward, or at least compartmentalize her pain. The only person who notices the dramatic shifts in Agnes is her best friend Lydia. And a part of what makes the film so fascinating is how those around Agnes respond to her trauma, each in their own way revealing their limitations and their fears. Agnes's assailant is not just someone she knew, but someone everyone around her trusted, her thesis advisor. The man is introduced to us as very meek, awkward individual, clearly nursing a crush. At first glance, he seems harmless and even likable. The film makes it very clear that this attraction is one-sided. Agnes really has no interest in starting a romantic relationship with her professor. I think by establishing this very clearly, it sets up for what would be that very haunting scene at the start of this video. What makes her assault especially terrifying is that it was committed by someone she knew and trusted. And not only that, someone who had power over her career. And I think this film beautifully illustrates what grooming looks like and what it means to endure abuse at the hands of powerful men. From what little we see of their interactions, he's clearly someone that she looked up to. He positions himself as someone that she can rely on, someone that she can trust. And Agnes believes that this trust has been earned through hard work and effort, when in reality it was manufactured to disarm her. And watching their interactions, he not only praises her, but he humbles himself around her. He makes it seem like she is someone that he looks up to. He leaves the door open in his office, allowing her to sift through all his things and read the comments on her paper, all of course praising her. And so when he asks to meet her at his home, she initially hesitates. Even though she had her doubts, she had this deep desire to want to trust him. Even before she steps inside his home, there's a very chilling moment when she asks where her thesis is, and he almost forgets, and you can see this facade of his slipping. It's in that moment the camera pulls back, centering on the professor's home, nestled among identical houses, and he's basically just a predator in plain sight. And the longer the shot lingers, the more terrifying the scene becomes. As her thesis advisor, he not only shaped her academic path, but also her sense of self-worth. And now she's left wondering, why did that happen to me? Am I really that smart? Do I deserve this job that I have? Her perception of reality just shatters. Being taken advantage of by a man that you trust and look up to and feel safe around can really leave you feeling trapped. And that's exactly what Agnes's life looks like. Her university, once a space of endless opportunity, now feels like this cage she doesn't really know how to get out of. Although she tries to speak about the assault, those in positions of power, like doctors, lawyers, university officials, respond with indifference. They don't discourage her from reporting the crime, however, they don't encourage it either. The reason why predators, especially those with glowing reputations, get away with their crime is because they solicit their victim's silence. Her advisor resigns shortly after the assault, which tells me that he knew exactly what he was doing. And he makes no attempts to defend his reputation. He just moves on to the next hunting ground. His sudden disappearance really gaslights Agnes into pushing the assault aside and trying to move on with her life. And although he's gone, his presence very much still lingers. And I love the way the film used Agnes's home, especially her windows, as a reflection of her inner state. After the assault, she's no longer comfortable in her own home. She's often seen looking outside her window, and she seems very anxious, very nervous. She constantly checks if the door is locked, and she both fears the outside world but knows she has to interact with it in order to move on. She stuffs the clothes and anything from that day in a closet. I thought Agnes's facial expressions, body language, and dialogue subtly convey the confusion and emotional disconnection that often accompany the processing of deep, overwhelming trauma. I thought Agnes's description of the assault and the toll it has taken on her body was one of the most emotionally triggering aspects of this film. The line, "My pants are broken," completely shattered me. She wants to speak out, but she knows that the world is hostile to listening. Even if they are willing to listen, they're not willing to listen without judgment. And I thought that's what made Agnes's best friend Lydia such a remarkable companion. She offers Agnes a safe space to process her emotions without fear or judgment, and she never treats her any differently, even though she can see her best friend is in a lot of pain. And I love how the movie, in a very subtle way, gives nod to Lydia through that speech at the end of the film. Following the assault, Agnes has to find a way to confront her past without allowing it to destroy her future. And this paralysis is something she drifts in and out of constantly. She tries to move forward with her career, her personal life, her social life. However, everything is shadowed by this violence and pain she wishes she could forget. And I think the film beautifully illustrates the disconnect between the mind and the body that happens after an assault, and the painful and very slow process to realign them again. Throughout the film, she keeps mentioning how she can't picture herself having children or growing old. She literally cannot even imagine what her future looks like, what she wants it to look like. It's just a blank space. Physically, she tries her best to move on, and you can see that throughout the film. She goes to work, she's getting promoted, she has a boyfriend, but mentally, she's completely somewhere else, trapped in a past that her body keeps trying to outrun. Agnes's character is contrasted by Natasha, a young scholar competing with Agnes for the same position. And even before we find out about this professor, there is a lot of nervous energy surrounding Natasha. Through Natasha, it becomes clear that Agnes is not the only victim. And it feels like this professor has a pattern of abusing his power, either through force or luring them with the promise of false opportunities, only to disappear once he's taken advantage of them. Although Natasha insists their interaction was consensual, her deep devastation and constant sort of conflict with Agnes really does suggest she expected something she never received. And Natasha is such an interesting character because she's almost like screaming for help without really ever articulating exactly what took place or how it happened. What Natasha describes as consensual is complicated if that consent was solicited by the promise of a job or the threat of losing a position or a job. Most people are assaulted by someone they know, and a part of Agnes's struggle is trying to reconcile the man she thought he was to the man he truly is. The conversation between Agnes and Natasha was so insightful because a lot of victims feel like they're the only ones, when in fact there are so many different ways perpetrators often coerce their victims. A part of surviving an assault is navigating a world hostile to listening. Especially as women, we're very much conditioned to stay quiet even though we have every right to scream. And what makes Natasha, again, so interesting is that you can see that she's screaming, like there is a problem, except she never asks for help. Because Agnes never reported the crime, she only told her best friend Lydia, she's built up this pressure cooker of emotions inside of her, and you can slowly see how these emotions are bubbling to the surface. And I think this film beautifully exemplifies why it's important to report an assault. Many victims hesitate because a conviction is unlikely, but what deserves more attention is the healing and empowerment that comes from breaking that silence, because when you're just in your own head about it, you can slowly and surely just eat yourself alive. One of the film's standout scenes is when she's summoned for jury duty, and I thought the scene brilliantly captured why the legal system is just ill-equipped to encourage and support victims in at least speaking out. The law likes to fit people into tiny little boxes. Trying to express the full scope of your emotions and experiences into a very narrow framework is enormously difficult. During jury selection, the prosecutor explains the different categories of the law the jury needs to understand before serving as a juror. At first glance, this seems very straightforward. However, upon closer examination, these different categories become almost impossible to distinguish depending on the crime. After the explanation, the prosecutor asks if anyone on the jury has been a victim of a crime, and immediately Agnes's hand shoots up. For a moment, Agnes felt safe enough to confide in the prosecutor and all the people around her until she realized that they were all strangers. When the prosecutor tries to probe as to why Agnes raised her hand and then lowered it, Agnes does her best to explain herself according to the framework the prosecutor had presented. However, it's very limited and impossible. Victims do not exist in neat little boxes. I mean, how do you explain being assaulted by a man you fully trusted? When the prosecutor asks whether or not she reported the crime, Agnes said no because all she had was a button. And this was without a doubt one of the most visceral descriptions of an assault I've ever heard on camera. It alludes to both the violence of the act and the complete lack of consent. He broke her button. He forced himself inside her and she never stood a chance. She also explains that she doesn't want him to go to jail because he has a child. And if he went to jail, he'd be someone who does that who's now in jail. And I think what she's trying to express is how the law inadequately deals with the root cause of these crimes, which is how someone in a position of power is able to get away with these actions for so long. Not only is he allowed to get away with it, no one is really fazed by it. The university barely flinches when they hear that he's assaulted her. In fact, they're pretty much happy that he's gone, and they don't really care if he goes on to hurt other people. And I think her conflicting feelings towards her professor really exemplifies the self-blame a lot of victims go through. And what's frightening about people like her professor is that they're almost impossible to prosecute because they don't fit into the image of someone who would commit that act, or at least someone that the law would want to punish for committing that act. We don't get any flashbacks in the film. We never really see how her relationship with her professor progressed or her time working on her thesis. However, you can see that she is thinking about every moment prior to the assault, studying where and when everything went wrong. She uses pages from her thesis as a curtain and just stares at them. And throughout the film, you see her revisiting her thesis, staring at these pages, and really wondering, where did it all go wrong? Natasha, her rival, constantly points out that Agnes was a chosen one, her professor's favorite. But now we know she wasn't chosen, she was actually targeted. And the question is, why me? Why was I targeted over everyone else? And what's scary is she'll never know. There's a moment in the film where she's being promoted and she's told that she received glowing recommendations from past faculty. And one of those recommendations came from her thesis advisor. And a lot of the compliments that he had given her, a lot of the comments on her paper that once made her feel so good, now just make her sick to her stomach. And this lingering uncertainty about her professor and about her university makes her hyper aware, not just of her career, but of her personal space. And I think the assault in so many ways totally eroded her ability to trust herself again. And I think one of the standout scenes is when she's having a panic attack and she's saved by this Good Samaritan. This brief encounter is another extremely powerful moment in the film, very subtle, compassionate, deeply human. There's no right time or right way to talk about trauma. It weaves itself into your life at different times in varying different degrees. And it can take years and years before someone feels comfortable to speak out. During this conversation, she recounts recounts her experience, her memory of it. She never names it directly. Instead, she discusses the aftermath, the panic attacks, the anxiety, the weight that she still carries. She then goes on to state two of the most heart-aching lines I have ever heard on screen. Like, this movie has so many moments that just left me at a loss for words, to be honest. She explains that she feels bad when she thinks about it, but guilty when she doesn't think about it. And this perfectly captured the painful, self-punishing cycle that victims are often left in. When she does think about what happened, she feels terrible, she feels afraid, she's in a lot of pain. However, when she doesn't think about it, she feels guilty because she's not ready to confront the weight of this trauma yet. And this is a common cycle that a lot of victims go through. Either you're avoiding it because it's too painful, or you're confronting it and it's just a load too heavy to bear. The film then goes on to conclude with one of the most emotionally piercing scenes I have seen. Like, this film really sneaks up on you in so many ways. It ends with her best friend coming back to visit her, this time with her family, which is in such stark contrast to the start of the film. And I think it really exemplifies how this trauma has stalled her life. And although Agnes is moving forward, it has slowed her down considerably. While babysitting her best friend's child, she starts to have a conversation about the horrors of life. And this is where the film's title weaves itself in. Much of this film is about the inevitability of evil. No matter how hard we try, sometimes bad things just happen and there's not much we can do about it. Throughout the film, you see Agnes really wrestling the urge to self-isolate. At one point, Lydia literally asks her, "Do you go outside?" And what makes the film quite devastating is that it acknowledges that trauma cannot be undone or fixed, only carried, and the only way forward is not alone. In this monologue with this baby, she's expressing the unfairness of life, and without pity, she simply states, "You're not broken, you're not alone, I'm not afraid of your pain, and I'll stay." And that's how the film ends, and I just thought that this was such a beautiful movie. So far, it's my favorite movie of the year, and I think this film requires multiple viewings because it's just so layered, and each and every time you will notice something different. And I thought this movie beautifully demonstrated how trauma transforms you. If you've seen this movie, please let me know. If there's anything else you've noticed, please let me know, and until next time.